Hello and welcome to the March edition of the Organic Gardening Podcast. I'm Fiona Taylor, and later on I'll be joined by my colleagues Chris Collins, Anton Rosenfeld and a very special guest, Pauline Pears, for our Postbag. We're raring to get outside in the garden now spring is here and it's getting warmer and lighter. Later on, I'll be in Kate Bradbury's garden discussing the release of her latest book, One Garden Against the World. It's a call to action for gardeners, communities and individuals to do more for wildlife in the face of climate change. In the Postbag, the team discuss cleaning water butts, organic and vegan alternatives to bone meal, and pond care. At the end of April, we're taking part in the Big Give Green Match Fund to raise money for our fantastic heritage seed library. From the 22nd to the 29th of April, donations to Garden Organic via the Big Give website will be doubled. Head to our website to find out how you can double your donation to Garden Organic and the Heritage Seed Library. Our address is gardenorganic.org.uk. But now I'm off to join Chris in the potting shed. Hello, Chris. How are you?
I'm good, Fiona. How are you?
Yeah, I'm really good. And my goodness, hasn't spring come?
Spring has sprung,
oh, my
I think.
word. There's just been, really a good run of warmer weather.
But that's such a good thing. That's a good sign for the year ahead, I think.
Okay.
Hasn't deluged us with water like it did last year or got really hot, too hot,
Yes.
So it's felt a bit more normal and the plants are responding. I mean, the magnolias in North London have been absolutely fantastic this year.
Yeah.
And so just to see those old friends pop up like the forsythias and the kerriers and all these sort of shrubs that suddenly come back to life. You've forgotten about them for a little while and they're back in play.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, really, there's no reason to hold back at all now. Here we are, April, the longer days, the clocks have changed, weather will be getting warmer. Of course, we can't predict whether it will be wet. It's been quite dry, hasn't it, during March? But what we can say is there probably are going to be a few extremes.
You usually get a usual kick of winter, don't you, in April, and you think it's over, and there'll be a little east, the wind from the east will pop its head up, and so always on gardeners, if you've got stuff that's vulnerable, make sure you protect it.
Yeah,
it's obviously the month where you want to be hardening stuff off into May as well. Make sure you're acclimatising it, but just always part weatherman, keep an eye out to make sure if you've got anything tender that it doesn't get damaged. If you've got all that from to sow and grow, especially.
Yeah. Okay. What about those people who are going, I didn't get round to it in March? How about you? Did you get round to it in March?
Yes. Well, I've got quite an army of tomatoes, aubergines, peppers and chilies in the front room.
Okay.
They've all been pricked out and potted up. They're looking good, actually. So some of them will go down my allotment and some of them will go on some of my projects, like the kitchen garden at Stansted. So that's quite exciting. Now I'm looking at brassicas, really. I'll go into sowing brassicas, what I call my second wave. But yeah, I'm quite ahead of the game. I've had a really busy month with work.
Yeah.
So I always feel like I'm catching up a bit.
Yeah.
But I think don't worry about that. It's still, you can still sow tomatoes now.
Yeah.
And this is not the end of the world. Still sow aubergines. So just keep going.
Keep going. Yeah. Don't lose heart.
And you remember you got through, so you can start sowing anything like quick salad crops or anything like that. You can still do now. Still too early for your runner beans, your squashes, your pumpkins. They're all a bit later on. And there's still plenty to do. Yeah.
With all this glorious weather, Chris, you must have had some nice time down at the allotment.
Well, my time's been tight, to be honest with you. Yeah, because obviously, I've got to do my allotment, but I've got clients to keep happy as well. So I'm spread very thin this time of year. Yeah. And you've got to be careful not to put pressure on yourself because you think, I need to be doing this, I need to be doing that. There's still quite a lot of time. We're only just getting into spring now, really, in gardener's turn. My allotment's all ready to go. I have this ritual of changing the beds around and taking all the timber up, reforming the paths and stuff, which is like a very Chris Collins thing to do.
Yes.
So it's all done. So I worry about it sitting empty for too long, the plots.
Bare soil.
Yeah,
exactly.
So I will get down there and I will drill sow, hardy annuals and veg and stuff. Yeah, salad crops and I think if I put a full day shift in, then it'll be my day off. It'll be Sunday and I'll end up gardening. That's what.
Yes, I know. Yeah. Tell me about where you've got to with potatoes.
Well, I've got to my earlies are chitted, and so my second earlies actually they're ready to go in. They're absolutely ready to go in, and I'm going to go against the no dig a little bit here because I'm going to put them in a very quite pernicious weedy area of the allotment, and I'll trench them, and because I want those crowns to come up and ruffle light out from the weed. So yeah, but that's what I'll do with those. But yeah, they're ready to go. I think people, I mean, you get these terms like earlies, second earlies, mains, don't you? And they're sort of staggered. But I think you can kind of repeat potatoes like through the summer, you know. So if they're ready, you can take them up. You can always put some more in. So they're very resilient plants, potatoes.
Yes, I think that's right what you're saying there, because I think there seems to be a lot of rules and regulations around potatoes.
What your average person's going to go, what's this early? What's the second early?
Yeah.
Somebody who gardens all the time will know that, because it's just timing of the planting, basically. But I think you can, when you get Christmas potatoes now, but all they are is Maris Pipers or something like that. You just put them in much later. Yeah. So you tend to find, especially if you water them early on, you chip them and water them early, give them good irrigation early on, they soon catch up. If they've got the light and the heat, and the soil's warm, they'll go. Yes. So yeah, they're one crop I don't worry about too much. Last year, because we had a cooler spring rather, I just had a bumper time. You did as well. It was a really good year for potatoes.
Yeah, I did. It's encouraged me. I've put them on my kind of, top 5 list.
Yes, yeah.
But I'm a bit late in the day. I haven't got anything on the go yet. On the potatoes, I've not even gone and got hold of any seed potatoes. So I do need to do that. But as you say, it's something you can just keep doing over the summer.
Yeah, it's not too late. It certainly isn't. And I just love freshly dug potatoes.
Yeah.
They're just
so rewarding. And actually they do, new potatoes in pots is great.
Yeah,
too.
Yeah.
It's
they're good. They're good food. They just taste so great.
Taste wonderful. Yeah. So many different uses. The thing about them though is obviously they're not a native crop. They, were discovered.
Peruvian.
Exactly. So they aren't frost hardy in the sense that the tops don't like the frost. But if you've sunk your potato in low enough this time of year and you get a hard frost, is that a problem?
No, mine have come back. Because what will tend to, I've seen this happen to quite a lot of the allotments I'm on, is when they've come up, it's usually the wind that does the damage in that area. So your earlies are vulnerable to easterly winds, and what it does is just browns the foliage. But I've found that actually they tend to recover okay. So if that happens to you, cut them back, cut the dead out, or cut them back a bit, let them shoot. They'll do that, no problem.
Right. Yeah. Okay. And the seed potatoes themselves under the ground are just getting on with putting the roots out, putting the shoots up.
So I will put mine in about 30 centimetres depth, for about 25 centimetres apart, and I'll do it on the diamond, so I'll stagger them, and then you just get this foliage come up and it forms a really dense plant, and that's blocking the light then for the weeds and stuff. So. And then I'll do a little bit of earthing up if I feel like it, if I've got time. But you've kind of earthed up by trenching anyway.
By putting it in deep in the first place.
Yeah. So it's a bit of digging, but, I know that's not everybody's cup of tea. It helps me control weeds in very weedy areas. That's why I do it.
Yeah. I think when it comes to your food plot, you're wanting to maximise whatever space you've got for food growing.
Yeah.
And you are going to have to guard against weed. You don't want them to be competing with the food crops, do you?
Food crops in themselves are quite hungry plants. We eat them, so they take a lot of nutrient as well. So you are in a situation where you have to practice husbandry. There's not two ways about it.
Yeah. Of course, it's this time of year though where the nettles start appearing. That's probably a weed we do want, isn't it?
Well, it's very good for wildlife, certainly moths and stuff. And also, actually, it tastes quite nice when it's young. So a lot of people will eat it. And then Outward Bound's place I work, they'll go around collecting it and the kids will, make stuff with it. Yeah. So it's very nutritious, Yeah. So again, I think, like, maybe I was talking about wildlife corridors. And so there's an area you could let it grow where it's not interfering with things, then that's fine. So they've always got a place.
Yeah. So it's pockets, isn't it? Yeah. I've kind of gone for 5 crops that I can try and really succeed with this year, and that I've got is spinach and salad leaves. I always love leaves. I can't have too many of them. No. I have them at every mealtime. Any kind of leaf. I absolutely love it. I've not been a great grower of kale. I belong to a veg box scheme, community supported agriculture, and you go and get your, veg and weigh it out yourself. It's all part of a sort of cooperative, and I absolutely love it. I joined at the beginning of the year. And this week, they had loads of kale leaves left over, but small ones, little baby kale leaves. And I took, I kind of measured out how many I was allowed, which was loads because, they don't weigh very much. And then I found myself snacking on them. It's so sweet and delicious. And of course they were freshly cropped from the ground that morning. Oh, blimey, what a difference.
Yeah.
So, growing leaves is definitely on my list this year. Have you got other things that you are just starting to sow? So you talked about you're going to do some drill sowing in April. What are we talking about there?
Well, the drill sowing will all be all my leaf crops. It'll be my spinaches, it'll be my radish, it'll be my beets. I'll start my parsnips and carrots off with the hundreds of toilet rolls I've managed to save. So I'll start those in trays on the balcony. And because I think they do much better if you start them off a toilet roll and transplant them out later. They certainly seem to on my site anyway. And then I'll start propagator sowing. I'll probably do all my brassicas, like my kales, my cauliflowers and that sort of stuff will all start off on propagator. So it tends to be quite an intense sort of month for seed sowing, definitely. And then obviously as it comes to the end of the month, that's when I'll start thinking about the tenders like runner beans and squashes and pumpkins.
I don't need to worry too much about that. That's a lot to pick.
That's
sort of well into May that you may.
I wouldn't really put them out till the end of May, really.
Yeah.
So, and if you sow them too early, they tend to get quite leggy, and so they stretch because they want the light, because the light levels are low. So you get a lot of foliage as they climb up to go and try and go for the light, but the roots are always very, very poor.
You see, that's something that really does strike home, because I think we get really excited because we're looking at what looks to us a big, tall plant, but actually what we should be getting excited about is a proper root system. And it's a bit of a false indicator, isn't it?
Yeah, and if you put them out without a decent root system, they'll just
fail.
They just don't do anything. I also like to put them in root trainers as well. You get quite a good root ball like that as well. It forces the roots down.
But I suppose it's also a really good principle in terms of propagation, because ultimately you're propagating stuff that you're going to put outside. And fundamentally, it's going to survive with a better root system than top growth.
Yeah. That's crucial. You've got a good root system before it goes out.
Yeah. I know that you've been accused, Chris, of being a little bit too affectionate when it comes to your seedlings, and you stroke them.
Yeah.
Go on, tell us why you do that.
I just think that you're mimicking the wind, you're mimicking the outside conditions. So I like running my hands over them, basically. And I think you just get a sturdier plant that way.
Yeah.
So if I flip them, obviously, because I've got quite a lot, I'll have, at the moment I must have about 200 plants in the front room, the aubergines, and I've got that in there. And because I have to make sure they're turned so they're facing the light, they don't stretch too much. So that's just a good excuse at the same time to play with them as well.
Give them a bit of love. Yeah. Do you talk to them?
I probably do, yeah. I'm probably not aware of it, but I probably do, yeah.
Well, it's interesting, all this information that's coming forward now about how plants communicate with each other.
Yes, yeah.
It's fascinating.
Well, certainly in forests where they get, the mycorrhizal networks, and they tell each other if one's sick, they reckon they help out, and all this sort of thing. It doesn't surprise me because nature works as a unit, as a cooperative, doesn't it?
Yeah. So what are you going to actually sow in April? And tell me a little bit also about flowers as well.
Yeah, so my flower-wise, all my hardy annuals will go in.
Okay.
So, they'll certainly go in. My favourites, I always talk about my hardy annuals, and they'll go direct sow. But I'll also start some semi-hardy ones, like my stuff from my balcony, like my pelargoniums. I like my pelargoniums. They'll all start getting sown as well.
So you do them from seed?
Yes, I do them from seed, yeah. So my half-hardy annuals will start going in at the same time.
Okay.
And then I'll wean them gradually to go outside for the end of May. So things like pelargonium seedlings tend to start quite slowly and then grow. So I've got a bit of time. Mid-April, I'll probably start doing those. Some plants like the belia, you could put it in February. So I always have a little look at the seed packet, get your guide as well. Yeah. And then also I save my brassicas, and then on the allotment there'll be a lot of drill sow, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, it amazes me how quickly they come on. I mean, when you think of pelargonium in particular, if you're not sowing a seed until April, and yet it will be a full plant in how many weeks?
Well, I reckon by the time sort of when I've hardened them off and I put them out, by early July, I've got pretty decent plants usually, So I put them out at 6-leaf stage. I mean, things like pelargonium, you can start them in March, start them early if you wanted to, but they, but a half-hardy bedding, I usually get them up and running then into the baskets by beginning of June, late May, beginning of June, and I start my liquid feeding, and then I've usually got pretty decent baskets by the middle of July.
Okay.
Yeah.
But at this stage of the year, nothing's getting a feed, I assume.
No, nothing at all. It's still all seedling at the moment. Some people might give their seedlings a little drop of seaweed extract on it. Some might do. I prefer to wait till they're a little bit bigger.
Well, I mean, this time of year, of course, Easter's coming up, and, that is the big weekend where people who perhaps have never even thought about gardening might think, oh, give it a go this year.
It's supposed to be the big weekend for the garden centres.
Yeah.
It's kind of a bit of a make or break Easter, isn't it, in the gardening world? And I guess I'm just wondering if we've got some people listening or people who've got friends who are complete beginners. What would you recommend if they were to go to the garden centre? Because what so often happens is, we all get terribly enthusiastic. We go down, maybe Good Friday or, Easter Saturday, we're popping down to the garden centre and we're filling our trolley with all these things that look absolutely gorgeous. And, perhaps we'll get them home and, they might be not frost hardy. They might just, not survive a dry spell. We perhaps don't pot them into the ground or pot them on quick enough, all that. And then all of a sudden 6 weeks later, all that joy has kind of dissipated because we didn't actually act on those purchases as quickly as we could have done. So if you were going to the garden centre on Easter weekend and you were a complete beginner, what should you be buying?
Yeah, so impulse buying happens a lot, I'm sure, God. Yes. So it's when you get a sunny day, you think, and Easter comes up, you've got bank holidays as well, and off you go and spend. But yeah, so I would, if I only had 3 items to buy, I would concentrate my fire on seeds, I think, because that's, but that's a personal thing, because that's how I like to grow plants, I suppose. So a propagator, a little heated propagator, you can buy that and that will last you 20 years, 30 years, and you can start a lot of seeding that successfully, I reckon. So I'd probably do that, I'd probably do seeds. Maybe I'd treat myself to one nice plant, maybe. Maybe a viburnum or something. Some sort of sturdy,
hard-wearing shrub that's not going to fail. So maybe it's Easter weekend and you're thinking, do you know what, that particular bed in my garden, maybe it's just a straightforward flower bed, maybe it's a raised bed. I want to do that bed this weekend. What are the key things you're going to need?
Yeah, well, certainly make sure it's topped up properly. So multi-purpose compost would be fine for that. Yeah. In an ideal world, you'd be making your own compost.
Yeah, sure.
But if you're not, obviously, if you're just starting out, it's probably not chopped to that. So certainly top it up, basically. Remove any weed or anything that's in there already. Top it up and then pick what you're going to grow in it, basically. Yes. Simple as that.
So all this talk about humans and garden centres, actually spring is all about the birds and the bees and wildlife and what we can do for wildlife. And I guess I'd love to hear what you're doing during April, Chris, on the allotment and on the balcony.
Well, yeah, of course, I will sow my pollinators in. I always go in, that's for sure. My balcony is alive with little birds.
Wonderful.
It's funny, actually, the other day I woke up and I've got these French doors, glass French doors, and the feeder was empty and their little blue tip was jumping up and down like that, trying to get my attention. It's really funny.
because the feeder was empty.
That's
hilarious.
So you do get that sort of, and also, I share a pond area with my neighbour on the allotment site, and so we get the frogs in already. So it's not a garden without the wildlife. I've always said that, and we need to make sure that they can share it with us.
In March, I visited garden writer and author Kate Bradbury at her home in Brighton, where I toured her urban garden oasis. Kate shared her passion for wildlife-friendly gardening and the power of small actions to create meaningful change. She and I discussed how connecting with nature, whether by planting pollinator-friendly flowers, creating habitats, or simply observing the life in our gardens, can combat eco-anxiety and foster community engagement. I started by asking her to tell us more about where she lives.
We are in Portslade, which is just outside Brighton, just on the edge of Hove. We are in a very, very urban area, but we do have a really nice park behind us. So we do get some wildlife in from the park.
Give us sort of measurements roughly how big this town garden is.
It's about 40 foot and there's a sort of ginnel or alleyway, or what do we call it down here, Twitton at the back, which is an old coal route, which connects all of the gardens.
Ah, right. That's going to be quite important then from a wildlife perspective.
Yes. So that's where the hedgehogs come in, the toads and the frogs and the newts. So lots of species come in via the alleyway, which is, it connects all of the gardens locally, which means lots of wildlife don't have to use the road, but it also connects the gardens to the park, which is just on the other side of this housing estate here. So actually, even though it's a very built up area, there's these little networks that the animals are using, which I'm sort of taking advantage of to encourage them in, to give them homes here.
We're going to have a little walk around, but I'm going to just describe what I'm seeing. So there's a fabulous rowan tree at the end of the garden, and then we've got effectively a summer house, so a structure at the bottom of the garden, and then in front of the garden is a really good sized pond for the size of the garden. That is a good, strong expanse of water there. And then there's beds down either side, and there's fencing with trellising above it. So you've created as much planting space, I would say, as you possibly can.
Yeah, I think it's really important to go upwards as well as flat on the ground, trellises, and it looks nicer as well.
I think there's been so much around about letting your garden go and leaving it for nature, which is absolutely brilliant. But beauty is a big factor for us gardeners, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm a gardener first and foremost. I've always been a gardener. I want things to look beautiful. I get excited by plants. I choose to only grow plants for wildlife, but a lot of those are really beautiful. Some of them are less beautiful, and I grow them at the back, but you can do things that make things look nice. I'm really excited about my climbing rose. I planted another rose up an obelisk, which I'm sort of training up, and then I'm hoping to cover the shed roof with it as well, which potentially is going to look lovely for me, but also provide nesting habitats for birds. So there's lots of things you can do that have dual meaning and dual purpose for both us and for the wildlife.
How much of an emphasis is there on native planting?
There's quite a lot of native plants. I tend to have a rule which is mainly native shrubs and trees, and then a mixture of native and non-native herbaceous and other flowering plants. So on my sort of left-hand side of the garden, which is the shady side, so it's a west-facing garden, on the left-hand side I've got native guelder rose, native hazel, hawthorn, spindle, and then on the right-hand side, which is the sunny side, I've got things like lavender, perennial wallflower, buddleia, which sort of complement other sort of native plants like foxgloves, primroses, and some viper's bugloss. So there's a good old mix, and the native plants are really good for the leaf munchers, so the caterpillars of our native moths. So moths and butterflies will typically only use native plants to lay their eggs on, so we need to have that bank of native plants for the caterpillars, which obviously are at the bottom of the food chain and feed all the birds and the hedgehogs and the frogs. But then the advantage of non-native flowering plants is that they can extend the season. So when you've got bees and butterflies coming out earlier in the season, staying out later in the season, you've got that forage for them. And in Brighton, because it's so mild, my perennial wallflower is in flower all year round. It's in flower 10 to 12 months of the year. And I've also got my winter honeysuckle and my winter clematis, which also flower sort of in the winter as well. So I've got species using those as and when they need to.
You've had the Springwatch team here, actually. What did they spot while they were here?
What did we spot? Not an awful lot. I mean, I think we first spotted hedgehogs on Springwatch. So as part of the filming, we first spotted hedgehogs. So that was really exciting for me. But I think really with the Springwatch garden, we were building the blocks that then brought the wildlife in. Yeah. And actually, filming days are some of my favourite days in the garden because I've done stuff with Springwatch and Autumn Watch and Gardener's World, because there's a lot of sitting around and looking at things. So it was a filming day where I found that I had a rare dragonfly breeding in the pond, which is insane because it's such an urban area. And it was a filming day that I found a black redstart on the opposite roof, just sort of bowling around on the roof. I was like, what's that? Oh, it's a black redstart. Of course it is. What else have I found in here? A couple of butterflies, small copper and a ringlet. My first ever ringlet butterfly in Sussex was in the garden.
It's interesting you say that the idea behind it originally featuring on Springwatch was to show people, what you can do if you've actually got a garden that doesn't seem particularly nature friendly to begin with, and how you can then bring nature in whilst also turning it into a beautiful garden. Let's have a little walk around, because I'm really interested in the way you've incorporated habitats everywhere, but you don't necessarily see them. It's like, until you pointed them out to me, I wasn't 100% aware that they were here. I think that's quite interesting, because that's pretty much the same as an awful lot of wildlife that probably already resides in our gardens, and we're just not aware of it. Talk me through the habitats that we're looking at.
Okay, so we're standing in the middle of the lawn. The lawn is very small, and the sort of most obvious sort of hidden habitat here is that the lawn is used by the buffish mining bee, which is a really honeybee-sized brownish mining bee that nests in very discreet holes in the lawn. So I often sit on the bench and have a look and see it nesting. Behind us here, we have the garden bench. It's a very small garden. So when you read these books, when you sort of learn this advice on what to do and how to create habitats, often it's the advice is given in the context of having loads of space. I don't have loads of space. It's a 40-foot garden. So behind the bench and under the bench is my log pile, because otherwise that would just be dead space. And I have frogs living in there. And often in summer, the male frogs practice their croaking for spring, which I sort of like to see as a sort of party invitation for February shenanigans. And I will sit on the bench eating my lunch and there will be a frog croaking under my bum, and it's really cute. I've seen mice go in there. I've seen slow worms go in there. I've seen bumblebees scout the area to look for making a nest. So there's lots of species using it. Got this very usable habitat under and behind the bench.
While we're on habitats, there's a little bird box that you've put up. Again, I think sometimes there's a bit of a tick list, isn't there? Of right, well, put your bird box up. Put your bird bath out. But actually, funnily enough, they didn't use the bird box, did they? But they very much liked the vicinity of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think bird boxes are something that we should put up last, really. We should focus on the other sort of natural habitats first. Yes. But in a garden like this, where you don't have mature trees, a bird box can sort of replicate the hole that you would get in a mature tree. But yes, I put the bird box there knowing it was going to be a good spot, and the birds do check it out every year, but the robins actually nested just under it 2 years ago. I was right with the spot, but why would you nest in an artificial habitat when you could nest in a natural one? So they nested in the ivy beneath the bird box.
Yeah, I think that's amazing though, because it just shows that the instinct is there. I mean, as you say, you got it in the right place, and perhaps, the shadow it formed, provided a bit of extra cover, who knows, or a little bit of extra warmth in that part of the garden. So don't give up on your bird boxes, I guess.
Yeah, don't give up on the bird boxes. Potentially also could have sort of distracted predators if they were sort of looking in the bird box and actually the birds were nesting beneath it. That's quite a clever little guise. Yeah. So do work on the bird boxes, but work on the natural habitats as well.
And I noticed that your front garden, which is really tiny, had some upended pots on it. I just wanted to understand what you're trying to achieve with your front garden.
So my front garden is the world's smallest meadow. It's got long grass. It's got lots of native flowers. In the middle, I've got a big pot of a lemon tree, try and give it a bit of winter interest. But yes, it's basically a meadow with lots of native plantings. But it's also, because it's east facing, it's a bee magnet. And we're just entering bee season now. They're all a bit late this year. And obviously last year we had a huge knock on bee population. So every bee is precious. So I've got lots of bee habitats. I've got a couple of bee hotels for mason and leafcutter bees. But the pots you're referring to are my hairy-footed flower bee habitats. Hairy-footed flower bee, it's a native solitary bee species. They nest in cob walls. They often nest in chimneys. I've known them nesting in the ground as well. But they love a cob wall, and you can make a cob brick for hairy-footed flower bees. It's basically, you get some loam, you get some sand, and you get a bit of straw, and you mix it all together, and then you get a big pencil and you make these holes in, and they'll come and nest in them. But they're always quite sort of unattractive looking, sort of square box shaped things. And I thought, I wonder if I can just get a nice terracotta pot and make a nest that they would use with holes in it that I would want to dot around my little meadow in amongst all of the sort of early flowering spring blossoms and bulbs. They use them. They haven't woken up yet, but they do use them, and that's lovely. So I've got these lovely nesting habitats for hairy-footed flower bees.
I'm really interested to hear that all these different types of native bees need different types of habitats. And, it's kind of obvious when you think about it, but also, if you haven't stopped to think about it and you are, like me, ignorant of it, would you have any recommendations of the right sorts of habitats? I mean, we talk a lot about bee hotels, bug hotels, but actually they're not always right either, are they? And clearly the bumblebees that you're talking about need a different type of habitat.
Okay, I mean, I think sort of to start that, it's worth pointing out that there's 270 species of bee in the UK, if they all did the same thing, if they all had the same feeding and habitat requirements, they'd all be in competition with each other. So they've all evolved these slightly different habitats in order to not be in competition with each other. So yes, some bees will nest in bee hotels, which replicates holes in dead wood and hollow plant stems. So in the wild, if you imagine the woodland edge, you've got plant stems, things like hogweed, which grows and then in autumn sort of falls down. But then the following spring, the plant skeleton is still there. It just might have fallen down and there'll be, some holes in there. But the hollow plant stem is there and the bees will nest in it. You can replicate that habitat by having a bee hotel. Some bees will use it. Some bees prefer nesting in the ground. Some bees nest communally. Some bees nest individually. Some bees nest in mud. Some bees use leaves. Some bees mash up leaves to make a sort of pesto to make their nest. So there's loads of different things. So just having this armoury, if you like, of habitat means the more things you have in your garden, the more species you can attract.
So the pond, which is absolutely wonderful. I mean, I'm going to call it a lake, I think.
My neighbours call it a lake.
It's absolutely chock full of frog spawn, which feels a bit early to me. Have you got any thoughts about that?
So frogs will start spawning as early as December in the southwest of the UK. So basically it needs to be, nighttime temperatures need to be above 5 degrees Celsius and it needs to be wet. So a bit of spring rain and mild temperatures will get the frogs out. This happens at earliest in Cornwall, and then you see this wave of frog spawn sort of coming up the UK. So I know that when people in Southampton start reporting frog spawn, I've only got a week to go.
I mean, that brings us quite nicely to your book, the title of which is One Garden Against the World. And it's something of a call to action, a call to arms, but it's also kind of a real expression of something I think perhaps an awful lot of us are feeling, about a kind of rising sense of anxiety, at the same time wanting to be practical and take action. And it's a really inspiring read, and I found it very real as well. I wonder, first of all, why did you write it?
Because ultimately I'm angry. I am angry with the way things are going. I'm angry that we haven't acted when we've had the opportunities to do so. And I know that the connection I have with the natural world, it's not because I'm really odd, it's not a unique thing. It's something that we all have in us. I'm just more tapped into it than lots of other people. But I think as gardeners, we all have this connection, this affinity with the earth, with nature, and we can use our gardens to improve things for nature. That's not to say, our gardens represent 5% of the total landmass in the whole of the country. That seems really insignificant, but actually that's more than all of our nature reserves put together. And I think the connection is so important. If you actually start to have a relationship with the birds in your garden, with the bees, it makes me feel so happy, just feeling these little connections day by day in spring. Spring is just the best time of year because I'm just out, just saying hi to everyone, hi to all these new things that are just waking up and they're alive and they survived winter, and hasn't it all been brilliant? I think the more of us that have the connection, the more of us that understand the needs of different species, the more of us that see the declines, but also feel hope when we do see our first hairy-footed flower bee of the year, when we grow flowers that they visit, when we plant trees that birds nest in or land in or feed from, or all of those things, we have this greater understanding of the climate and biodiversity crisis. And I think that could spur us on to do more, to act more. And so I wanted to write a book that basically galvanised everyone to get stuff done. Really, that's the main point of it. I want people to act. I want people to understand. I want people to care, and I want people to act. And individually, there's a lot we can do in our gardens, but collectively, we need to push governments all over the world to do more, to actually take this seriously. Because why would we want to live in a world that's really depleted and scary, and when we have this now, and it's beautiful.
You talk a lot in your book about eco-anxiety. We all know that is a genuine thing. As a gardener, there are things you can do, and it is meaningful. Of course, one garden doesn't change the world, but 30 million gardens can. And actually encouraging each other and educating each other is only going to happen if we do join up together. So in this world where it's quite hard to find out what's going on in your community, how did you manage to locate people? Because that's something I think now that is very, very different in society. It should be easier, but it's harder.
It should be, shouldn't it? I think it's worth pointing out that as gardeners, most of us have got a garden. I think 87% of people in the UK have access to a garden, and that what we do individually in our gardens can really make a difference. But actually, individual action, as good as it is nothing without community. Community action is the way forward, and certainly with climate, becoming ever more precarious, being friends with your neighbours, doing stuff with your neighbours, caring with your neighbours is absolutely what we need to be doing. I'm going to be honest, it was really easy for me to establish these community groups and this community relationships because I moved here and was almost instantly on Springwatch. And so people knew who I was, and they, knocked on and asked me to do talks and stuff. And I said, well, actually, I'd really like to set up a hedgehog group. So let's take it from there. I think since COVID, a lot of neighbours have got WhatsApp groups going on. We've got a Facebook group in the next road, but lots of people from this road are involved in the Facebook group for the next road, which is really nice. And yeah, you do get a lot of stuff about bin day and people parking in the electric charging bays and wasn't this, a lot of moaning. But you also get stuff saying, I've just seen my first hedgehog of the year, or I've got blue tits nesting. Where is any birds nesting in your garden? And you can have a conversation. And then you can identify the people who care and who are interested, and you can build relationships with them. I know that 2 doors down I've got a neighbour who's got hedgehog boxes and feeds hedgehogs, and then on the next road I know all of the houses where they've got hedgehog boxes and look after hedgehogs as well. We've got a network, we've got a corridor. I can't look after all of the hedgehogs in Portslade in my garden. I'd love to, but I've got a really good network of neighbours who are all helping. And, I've got this little Facebook group. There's only about 50 of us on it, but that's enough, that's enough. All around the park, we've got a park, and then all the houses around the park. There's, every few houses, there's someone who cares for hedgehogs. That's all that's needed. And then, just talking to neighbours. I've got plastic grass and paving on either side of me. That's not going to change anytime soon. But the more I talk about it, the more I engage, the more I share information about hedgehogs, share the joy of finding hedgehogs, share the joy of all my froggies. People say, I'm going to dig a pond, I'm going to do this, I'm going to put a hedgehog box in. And that's the way to do it, talk and enthuse and engage and, get people involved and offer to help as well. Just say, I've got some plants you can have. I've got some bit of old wood if you want to make a hedgehog box. I'll make you a bird box. All of these things. And then they'll come and tell you, and they'll come and say, put this bee hotel up and I've got bees in it. And that's really lovely.
I think we're all wanting to find ways to do things that will help, find some kind of meaningful action we can take. It's not for all of us. You talk in the book about being a reluctant protester, marching and those kind of things. It's not for all of us, although I absolutely loved going to the March for Nature. But there are things that we can do in our everyday lives. And I'm a great believer that if we break things down into something manageable, into a kind of just a micro action that we could take, something we could do, one afternoon, and then see what happens, and at this time of year, the spring, if you do something now, you probably will get a return almost immediately. What are the micro actions that you think we could take this weekend?
This weekend, you could sow some flowers, sow seeds of flowering plants that bees will visit. I mean, literally anything that you can see the centre of the flower, poppies, oxeye daisies, red campion. I love red campion. Loads of stuff. Just, go to the garden centre and just pick. I mean, cosmos, zinnia. There's a huge variety of plants. There's so much tree work going on. One of the things I do, sort of living in a very urban area, I've got lots of little bits of wood scattered around the garden. Where do you get the wood from? There's no wood. Every time a neighbour is having some tree work done, whether they're chopping a tree down, which is obviously upsetting, or they're just having it pollarded or pruned or whatever, or the street trees, we've got loads of street trees, I ask if I can have a log. And so my wood pile is my log pile is, I've got lots of different species. And actually in death as in life, lots of different species attract different species of insect. So I've got apple, I've got elder, I've got hawthorn, I've got willow. I've got all of these different types of wood, and I've got them in the log pile. I've also got them dotted around the garden. And different beetles will come in and use them, and different fungi will use them. And you're creating this sort of layer, this multi-layered biodiverse habitat that will then provide habitats for other species and opportunities. Everything's all about opportunities. So just create more opportunities by just bringing in more different things. Other little things you can do, you can just go and get a load of bricklaying sand and put it in a pile, smack it down in a sunny area of the garden. You'll get mining bees nesting in it within days. You can put a bee hotel. Choose a good one, so that it needs to be deeper. It needs to be at least 16 centimetres deep, ideally, that you can clean it out, so you don't get a build-up of fungi and predators. And you can put up a bird box. You can dig a pond, which is a weekend job, but a really rewarding one. Or you can make a container pond, which you can do in a couple of hours. You can use an old baby bath, one of those tin baths, or you can use a Belfast sink or something like that, and put a couple of plants in there, and make a little frog ladder using bricks or stones to get in and out, so species can get in and out. And you could do that, and you can watch the species that come in. There's loads and loads of stuff you can do. And I think what you were saying about micro actions. So many of the problems in the world are just so overwhelming that it's hard to know where to start. But if you start with stuff that's manageable and you can do it, and that you can instantly see an impact, that's really powerful.
I mean, just turning over the top part of your water butt so that it's flipped up the other way and therefore fills with water and is a drinking station. I think you've also put mealyworms out, haven't you, in yours? So using it almost as a kind of bird feeding station. That's amazing to me because, there's a lot around about bird feeders and squirrels and stuff, and, need to get your squirrel-proof bird feeder on. No, just turn your water butt lid upside down. And the other thing I've noticed in the garden today is you've got all sorts of little drinking stations dotted around at different heights.
Yeah.
And that's an easy thing that we can do.
Yeah, different heights is really important. So one of my bird baths is on the ground, and it is used by birds occasionally, but it's largely for hedgehogs. I've got a little bowl that's just catching drips from one of my water butts that I haven't fixed the tap on yet. That's used by hedgehogs. I've got a bird bath that's about 1 metre in height it's used by chiffchaffs. It's so lovely, and wrens and things. And then I've got and it has to be in a sheltered part of the garden, otherwise it will fly off. But I have one of my water butts, I have turned the lid on it, and all the shy birds, so the robins and the wrens will bathe in there. And often they use the rowan tree, and the pair will go in and they'll take it in turns to bath. And I'll just watch them, and it's just like they're just taking a little trip out to go and have a little bath together. It's just beautiful. And also because it's out of the way, I've stopped feeding the birds actually, because there's so much about diseases and land use and giving unfair advantages to some of the more dominant species that I've actually stopped feeding them. But 2 years ago when I had robins nesting, it was so dry, I was really worried that they were going to not be able to feed their young, so I put mealworms in, and because it's such an out of the way area, I managed to feed the robins mealworms without any of the other birds noticing, which was really something, because when starlings find out there's mealworms, they go crazy.
So different levels is important, and there are many things we can do, and the gathering of wood, I love all that. One last question, I just want to explore flatness. There's something very flat about our kind of horticultural tradition in this country. We do seem to sort of really glorify, the large expanses of flat lawn, and then flower beds in traditional kind of country houses that you might go and visit seem to be kind of raked at a certain angle. But actually nature needs it a little bit more rough and ready than that. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, all of these things, all of these little changes in the topography and the habitat provides different opportunities for different species. And you might never, ever know who visits those different habitats. But just having them there means there's an opportunity. So a little mound, a little mound of something. So as earlier I said, a mound of sand, you'll get mining bees nesting in it. You can have areas, when I took on my allotment neighbours flattened the whole thing. They spent 6 months flattening it before they actually planted anything. I just got on with planting because that was more fun. And now we've got these sort of allotments next to each other. Mine's a lot higher than theirs in some bits and then lower in other bits because they've leveled it all out. And I just think, well, in terms of landscape, nature isn't flat. It's not leveled out. It's not raked out. It's wobbly. And if you have something that's slightly raised, it's going to be a different temperature than something that's flat. And that's going to appeal to a certain species of bee over another species of bee. If you have something that's dipped, again, it's going to have different, it's going to, retain more moisture, and that's going to appeal to a different plant. So just having these little variations of things, these little natural niches, and all of its niches provides more opportunity. Opportunity is king.
Time now for the Postbag. We've got some really special people around the table today. As usual, Chris Collins is with us and Dr. Anton Rosenfeld. But we're welcoming Pauline Pears to the Postbag. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to give our listeners a little bit of context here. Pauline was one of the founding members of Garden Organic and the Brighton Organic Gardens, where we're broadcasting from now. She came here from Braintree with a whole I expect there was a whole caravan of people. Was there coming together?
A lot of stuff, but not many people. No, there was Lawrence Hills and his wife, Alan Gear, and Jackie Gear, a gardener, and me.
Okay.
We were soon joined by more people, but no, we moved from Braintree, from the original site where HDRA, as it was then, was started.
And you worked with us for many, many years, and you still contribute because anyone who's a member of Garden Organic will read you in our magazine that comes out 3 times a year, The Organic
Way. Yes, I still contribute to the magazine, and I give talks locally about organic gardening and promoting Brighton, of course. I had a wonderful 30 years working for the organisation.
It must be quite close to your heart, I should imagine.
My mother was a member. So that's why I noticed the advert in The New Scientist for a job, because I'd never have known what it was otherwise. A very small advert for one issue only.
Yeah.
So when you were coming into it, then in a way, that was all the start of that. We were really heavily dependent on. They were promoting pesticides and artificial fertilisers a lot, weren't they? And organics have kind of been pushed to the side a bit. Or
well, I was testing herbicides at Fison's at the time.
Right, yeah.
When I moved to organics. Very useful, because people who thought you were really sort of wacky and didn't know anything, you could just say, well, when I was working for the agrochemical industry, and they think, oh.
Yes, exactly. So they couldn't just so easily dismiss you when you could then turn around and say there's other ways of doing this.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you set out, and Lawrence did, you kind of you set out to prove the worth of organics, didn't you, really? Like, people might have thought it was a bit hippy-dippy, etc., rather than it being a science. So you kind of set out to prove it as a science.
Yes, I think it was the idea to give people advice, things that worked. But we didn't often we weren't overtly anti-pesticides. We were promoting things that worked and you could do in your garden.
Yes, exactly. How to do it.
And they could come here and see it. That was the thing about Brighton Gardens. They could come and see organics. And people always thought organics was vegetables full of holes and things. So we made sure everything looked really good. And ornamentals, people hadn't thought about organic ornamental gardens, really. So we wanted to have something for everybody.
And then, of course, Channel 4 came and made the series All Muck and Magic, and you starred in that. So tell us a bit about that.
Well, we all starred. We all did apart from Lawrence Hills, because he wouldn't stop talking. We all did the screenshot. We were all chosen, and it was great fun.
Yes,
we were complete amateurs. And if you look back to the first series, we are so dreadful, but people wanted to hear what we had to say.
Yeah.
And we were number 5 in the ratings on Friday evenings.
Fantastic.
Second only to the Golden Girls. And a lady stopped me in the street once in Hale Nye, and she clutched my arm and she said, I did it, you know. And I thought, what is she talking about? But she'd watched the series and it told her things that she wanted to know. And we had All Muck and Magic, More Muck and Magic, and yet more Muck and Magic.
Okay, 3 series. My goodness. So, I mean, really, it is incredible, isn't it, to think that you saw a job advert in The New Scientist. You then came from the agrochemicals industry, came across to this side of doing things, such an experimental time it must have been.
Much more interesting.
And then you're on the telly all of a sudden.
Oh, I know. Yes. It was, as I said, it was great. It was great fun to do.
Great fun. Well, we're really, really thrilled to have you here because
We've got some tricky questions to answer today, so it'd be great to have some additional wisdom around the table. So first of all, got a question from Mike, and he asks, I know that it's best practice to drain and clean water butts annually, but properly cleaning large butts is impractical or virtually impossible. Can you recommend any organic products which could then be added to the water to minimise risk of diseases? Well, I have to say, Mike, that we puzzled over this question, and I think none of us were able to own up to ever actually cleaning our water butts. So, Anton, I'm going to ask you first of all, why would anyone need to clean a water butt?
So there's two worries about what might be contained in a water butt. The first one is possibly the danger of Legionnaire's disease, which can propagate if it's in water which is above 20 degrees. This is really only a worry if you breathe in the water droplets. So if you're sort of spraying the water around as a fine mist. So actually, I think practically that's pretty unlikely to happen, because you tend to take water out of a water butt and water with a watering can quite close to the ground. And also in the summer, when the temperature's above 20 degrees, it doesn't tend to sit in the water butt that long, because you tend to be using it a lot on all your plants. The other worry is damping off as well. Those are diseases which they're fungal diseases which attack the base stem of seedlings and make all your seedlings all fall over. Traditional advice is that it's better to use tap water for watering your seedlings and save your water butt water for larger seedlings. Some people tend to ignore that advice and still get on okay, and other people still tend to do that as well.
I mean, I find that interesting, because I have had a terrible problem with damping off, and I have always watered with water butt water because I've got one right next to the greenhouse, so I had never really made that connection. So would you recommend, if you have got a problem with damping off, would you recommend just using tap water then for your seedlings?
I think if you've got a problem, then it's best to try and change something to see, obviously if you keep doing the same thing, then you're likely to get the same problem. So if that makes a difference, then then do try it. Yeah.
It could be the way you're looking after your seedlings, especially when the weather's a bit dreary and they're not growing very fast. So anything you can do to get your seedlings to grow fast and healthy and sturdy, like thinning them out, that might be a problem as well.
So I found if you're growing seedlings on a windowsill, I found having a reflector makes a massive difference. I thought it was just like a bit of a myth at first. That people said, oh, that will make your seedlings better. But once I tried using a foil reflector behind my plants, I suddenly had so much sturdier seedlings. They looked so much better. So that's something that's worth doing. Very cheap, just an old cereal box and some foil around it.
Yeah. But you can see when light levels begin to increase in spring, suddenly everything that was sitting there not doing a lot
suddenly starts to move.
Just that tad of difference, and things start to grow well. Because we feel we've got to start our seedlings off early because we must be ahead of the game and everything. And sometimes it's better just to wait another few weeks and you'll have no problem.
Yeah, I think patience plays a role in it, doesn't it? Because it's easy to get overexcited as soon as the days start getting longer.
So our conclusion really is that we don't think it's necessary to drain and clean your water butt. Obviously, if you do want to do that, then all you need is a scrubbing brush and some more water, and just clean it with that. You don't need to go any further than that. I mean, it's interesting because now there is quite a lot of talk about not needing to wash your pots at the beginning of a season. This kind of seems to fall into the same category. What do you reckon about that, Chris?
I will always rinse my pots out before I use them if it's soil and stuff. I think it's basic hygiene.
Really. Yeah.
Because you might get fungal spores over winter, and I don't know, but I've just always done it.
You've always done it. Yeah. I know. I know Emma here at
she does it. I mean,
she tends to brush them out.
Yes, that's what I mean. You don't need fairy liquid. You don't. I don't add any. I don't add any substance. It's just water, or like you say, you can use a brush.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Good. Thank you very much for that. Then staying with water, we've got a question about a pond, and it sounds like from the question somebody is just starting out with a pond. So I reckon we've got lots of advice here. So Sebastian has written and said, my second-hand prefabricated fiberglass pond has 2 splits in it. How would you recommend I fix it? Then what is the best filtration system for my pond? And do I need to plant hornwort into the material somehow, which is an oxygenator? So, okay, lots of issues here. So first of all, Chris, Sebastian's there. He's got his second-hand prefab glass pond, but it's got a couple of splits in it. What would you recommend?
I'd probably go for putting a butyl cover over it, really. I think that might be cheaper, especially not, there might be really strong resin or something you can use, but it might still carry on leaking after that.
Yeah.
Whereas some butyl liner is a fairly cheap way to do it. I think people buy these prefabs because they've got the shelving already in.
Yes.
They've got the moulded frame, so obviously you're going to plant marginals and deeper plants. It all comes as a kit. So there's a good case for you. I don't throw it away, but put it in situ in the ground, and then maybe put an inch or a couple of centimetres of soft sand, line it all, and then put your butyl over the top and gradually fill the pond, weight round the edges, put weights like stones around the edges, and gradually let it settle in and fill up. And I think you'll have a perfectly good pond. Then you'll have the shape you want.
Yeah.
And probably save you a few bob on the repairs as well.
Yeah. And of course, it's brilliant if you can, if you've got the patience to let the rain fill it up.
Yes,
for you.
you do that. Well, rainwater's ideal, really, because it has a perfect pH and stuff for what you need.
Yeah. Okay. Talking about sort of filtration systems, I mean, we would always say it's brilliant to have any kind of water in your garden for nature. And filtration system suggests that you may be looking at putting fish in your pond, which isn't the best thing in terms of a nature pond, because they will eat all the frog spawn or other important pond life. So you don't need a filtration system if you're just doing a wildlife pond, but you do need some form of oxygenating that water. So let's talk about that for a minute. Anton, what would you recommend in terms of the right plants for oxygenating a pond?
So you really want sort of floating or sort of oxygenating plants. There's stuff like hornwort, water milfoil, water buttercups, water violets. I'd also, if you're starting to get algae in there, some barley straw is something that usually helps to clear it out as well. There's sort of bacteria that live on the barley straw and help to get rid of the algae that's forming. Also, I think if you can have it in sunlight as well, that really, really helps for oxygenation. And if possible, avoid having it under a tree so that leaves fall into the water. I know it's not always possible, but
you need a bit of patience, because I think when you first set up a pond, all sorts of things can you get algal blooms and all sorts of things, but hopefully when you planted it up, they will
gradually balance it out. So because it's bound to go green soupy at first as soon as you get the sun on it, when it's just got water in it, isn't it? So so don't panic.
Take its time.
As Pauline says.
Just digging into the question a bit, Sebastian asks how to plant your hornworts or your oxygenators. I'm afraid you need your plant pots, don't you? There's no way, unfortunately, of kind of silting up your pond and planting something into the bed of the pond.
Put plant pots and weight them down so that they're able to grow.
Yeah. I know. I was so disappointed when I first got into this, because I thought, well, maybe I could create a kind of a riverbed type, scenario. But that is in fact impossible.
You can get a lot of just average fishing weights and tie them onto the stems, and that will hold them in the water as well. So it's quite a good way to do it. Yeah. So a little bit of manipulation and sort of, man-made intervention is required. But my goodness, the wildlife will thank you. If you haven't quite got the space to dig a large pond or even a small pond, there are other ways you can bring water into your garden. I think you've come up with a very good way of doing that, Pauline, haven't you?
Yes, well, I wanted a pond in my garden, but as you say, there wasn't really a place to put it. Well, I wanted water, and down the bottom of the garden, it was a new, I'd moved house, I found one of those Belfast sinks. I thought, well, I'm going to have water with plants in anyway. So I went against all the guidelines for a wildlife-friendly pond. So it's up on bricks, it's got straight sides, and advice was usually to have one that things can easily get in and out of. But it seems to work extremely well. I put a little ramp so any froglets could get out.
Yeah.
But last year, it's quite just, as you say, Belfast 6 quite small. I had 3 pairs of amorous frogs in it, and they kept on falling out because there wasn't enough room because they were very active. There wasn't enough room, so I'd pick them up, put them back in again. So as soon as I set that pond up, frogs came, and I had tadpoles. And as I say, it's small, and it looks nice, and you can grow a couple of nice plants in there.
So Absolutely. So it's all a question of just, finding the opportunity and making it happen, isn't it? Moving on to tree planting now. We've got a question from Gregor. I'd like to know if there's an organic vegan alternative to bone meal that provides the same root boost when planting new trees and shrubs. So, Anton, I'm going to ask you first, a vegan alternative to bone meal?
Well, you can use rock phosphate, which is obviously, in the keys in the name, it's absolutely full of phosphate. And there are other sources of phosphate as well. Even stuff like green waste compost will have some phosphate in it as well. The thinking has changed a bit with tree planting. We used to always put a lot of phosphate on to try and encourage the root growth, but actually we go with trying to get the roots to be independent and to seek out the nutrients. So what we do is we actually just dig a square hole or straight-sided hole so that we don't allow the roots to curl around, and we also just put the soil back in, because if you add lots of sort of rich compost with a lot of nutrients, the roots will just stay there. They won't spread out to try and seek other nutrients, and the root system doesn't get established. It becomes sort of mollycoddled in that little hole. So we actually want to encourage the roots to go downwards and search out for nutrients.
Okay, so you don't need bone meal or rock phosphate in the first place. Okay. Is there anything else that you might choose to use if you want to give your trees or shrubs a bit of a boost? Because I know I'm guilty of not always picking the right time of year to be planting my trees. So is there something that would still give it a helping hand, but at the same time not kind of curb its independence? Is there another way? Something else that I could be using, Pauline?
You could try mycorrhizal fungi, which come as a powder, terribly easy to apply. These are fungi that naturally occur in the soil, and their purpose in the soil is that they grow into the tree roots. They sort of like root extensions, and fungi are incredibly good at extracting nutrients from the soil. I mean, it's reckoned that our forests underground, every tree is connected by fungi. So you can add these, you sprinkle them on the roots when you're planting it. So they will help the roots go out to get phosphate. And the thing about putting fertilizers in, well-fertilized soil, that inhibits mycorrhizal growth. So better just to use the mycorrhizal powder. And if you're growing a tree or a shrub that's going to last, you're hoping it's going to be there for 10, 15, 20 years, the price of a bit of a mycorrhiza to start with isn't a lot.
Okay.
To give it a boost.
Well worth the investment. So, I mean, it seems like times have changed a bit, Chris. Would you say? I mean, what were you taught back in the day of planting trees?
Well, you were certainly old. A lot of the first trees I planted in my early career would have been round holes, that's for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
And what was happening is, I remember thinking this as well, particularly conifer species actually, is you get spiralling. So rather than the roots moving out, you need to hit a right angle and move out into the new soil. They just twisted like this. So a couple of times I remember lifting trees and seeing this spiraling. And of course, if they're like that, they're very vulnerable to the wind and to being blown over. So that was kind of the thinking behind getting what Tony Kirkham, who was one of the ones from Kew Botanic Gardens who run the Arboretum there, he was one of the first ones to come up with this theory of getting the roots to move in because of the square planting holes.
Okay. Yeah. Gosh, we've got to keep ahead of all this stuff. Really, really interesting. Okay. Our final question is about growing grapes. I've grown grapes in my greenhouse for 3 years, but I get too many bunches of very small grapes. So how can I increase the size of the grapes and reduce the number of bunches? Pauline?
Well, to reduce the number of bunches, just cut off bunches when they're small. But the next bit, my mum used to grow grapes, and I remember seeing her with her long-nosed grape thinning scissors, and you literally have to cut out half the little grapelets on the bunch. So it's a heck of a job. But if you're growing grapes for show or you want really good grapes, that's the only way to do it.
Is to thin out within the bunch itself.
Yeah.
Okay.
So a bit fiddly.
Okay.
It's a nice job if you don't have to be anywhere.
Yes.
You got to maybe put the reggae on the old iPods and you're away.
Yes.
And possibly maybe make sure the watering's right, because vines do use a lot of water. So if it's a bit short, then your grapes won't swell as much either.
Okay, so that will going to get your bigger grapes if you water it better.
But you need to give them the space to swell into.
Yes, I see. Yes.
Oh, it's all very logical, isn't
It is,
it?
it is, yeah. It's just like, you're thinning, so you'll just create the space and off they go. You get a bigger grape. And if not, you know what you can do. You can make a crumble with them.
If I was to do this, because I quite fancy growing some grapes in my greenhouse, I've never done it. It feels a bit intimidating, a bit advanced. I feel like it's the kind of thing you see in a National Trust property, when they've got grapes growing in the glass houses. But if I was to do this myself at home, any top tips about how to plant them, where to plant them, what end of the greenhouse,
Well, they definitely like cool roots. So, like most climbers, they'll probably be shaded by the stuff as they go up into canopies or whatever, like a linear. So I should imagine that's the case. And make sure that there's no direct sun onto the root area would be quite a good one. Mulching would help solve that as well, to keep them cool. And then literally, you're putting them into a framework. So I've got a grape on my allotment, and I've trained it along wires, 3 stems, a main stem and 3 sub stems, if you like, 3 branches. And then I just hit that back to 2 nodes every year, 2 buds every year, and it produces a new growth in the spring. And that new growth is what produces the flower, which then produces your fruit. So you want to keep a frame of old wood and then get the grapes on the new wood and then prune it back again.
Right.
And if you're going to be real National Trust about it, you plant the grape outside the greenhouse and train the growth in. So the roots are outside, especially if they're mulched nice and cool, and then you get your grape inside, so protected from the frost.
What a wealth of information we've had this time. That was the end of what I consider to be a bumper edition of the Postbag, not least because we were joined by the oracle that is Pauline Pears. Thank you so much for coming in and joining in, Pauline, and we hope to have you back again soon.
Oh, it's been great fun. Thank you.
Thanks so much to Chris, Anton and special guest Pauline Pears for answering the questions from our postbag, and to Kate Bradbury for inviting us to her garden in Brighton. You can find her book, One Garden Against the World, at all major book retailers. At the end of April, we're taking part in the Big Give Green Match Fund to raise money for our fantastic heritage seed library. From the 22nd to the 29th of April, donations to Garden Organic via the Big Give website will be doubled. Head to our website to find out how you can double your donation to Garden Organic and the Heritage Seed Library. Our address is gardenorganic.org.uk. Thanks also to Kevin MacLeod for the music. That's it. Till next time.